A lot of the ways you react are learned habits or defense mechanisms. The way you avoid certain conversations, or the way you joke when something might get too serious. The way you suddenly go numb or maybe shy during conflict. The way you try to convince yourself that something doesn't bother you when it clearly does. Most people think these might be just personality traits, but they're not. They are automatic psychological strategies that your mind uses to protect you from things that might feel overwhelming, like stress or fear or shame or rejection, guilt, pain, conflict. Now, defense mechanisms are not necessarily always a bad thing, but the issue is that some of those protections started to help you through situations that no longer exist. And if you never become aware of them, they can start to influence things like your relationships, your communication, your self-esteem, the way you see yourself or the way you see the world around you. I've been recently learning about defense mechanisms, and now you have to learn too. So let's go through some of them, some of the more common defense mechanisms properly, because the chances are that you've used some if not all of them, even without realizing it. And it's very, very nice to put a name or a definition to this behavioral or emotional coping protective system. So the first defense mechanism is denial. Denial is when reality feels too uncomfortable to fully accept there and then. So instead of processing it, your mind pushes it away. You minimize it or you avoid it. You pretend it's not affecting you. And everybody does this to some degree. Sometimes denial protects people temporarily while they process something difficult. But when it becomes a long term solution, it starts disconnecting you from the reality of what really happened. You see it all the time in relationships. Someone is clearly unhappy, clearly disconnected, clearly hurt, but they keep saying things like, no, everything's fine, or it's not that bad, or I'm just tired. Because accepting the truth would potentially force a situation where they would have to change. And change can feel terrifying. The second defense mechanism is projection. Projection is when someone struggles with the feeling inside themselves. So they unconsciously not only see it, but they look for it and they will find it in other people instead. Someone deeply insecure might constantly feel judged by everyone around them. Someone carrying a lot of anger might see everybody else as hostile. Someone who struggles with themselves, to trust themselves, might constantly accuse others of being dishonest. And the most important part is most people are not aware they're doing this, because projection protects the person from having to fully face what's happening internally. It moves the discomfort inside of them outside of them. The third defense mechanism we'll talk about is rationalization. This is where your mind creates logical explanations to avoid painful emotional truths. And people do this constantly. You didn't get the opportunity you wanted. So instead of admitting that really hurt me, you say, I didn't really want it anyway. Or that job probably is terrible or not as good as I thought it would be. Or they weren't good enough for me anyway. And sometimes some of those things can be or might be pretty true. But rationalization often appears when the explanation or the need for an explanation becomes more important than the emotion underneath it. Logic becomes the shield against disappointment. And the fourth mechanism is displacement. This is when emotions that belong to one place get redirected somewhere safer. So, for example, your boss humiliates you in work, but you can't really react the way you want to there. So you go home and snap at your partner, or you become irritated at tiny little things, or withdraw completely. You see, originally the emotion was very real, but it got displaced onto somewhere safer. And this is why people sometimes react completely disproportionately to small situations. It's because the reaction didn't actually begin there. It began back at that other thing that happened. Remember? And the fifth defense mechanism is repression. Repression is when painful thoughts, memories, or maybe emotions get pushed outside of your conscious awareness automatically. And this is one of the more misunderstood defense mechanisms, because people hear repression and they think completely forgot or completely forgetting about. But it's not always like that. It can look like just difficulty accessing a specific emotion or difficulty remembering a specific period or part of your life clearly, or feeling emotionally disconnected from experiences that should have had a big impact on you. Sometimes the mind buries things because at the time, feeling them fully simply would have been too overwhelming. Lots of people experience this. The sixth defense mechanism we'll talk about is reaction formation. This is when someone behaves the opposite of how they're actually feeling. If someone hurt you deeply, you might act cold and detached. Someone struggling with insecurity might become overly arrogant or full of themselves. Or someone craving connection might act like they don't need it at all or don't need anyone. And this happens because sometimes the real emotion feels far too vulnerable to expose directly anyway. So the mind flips it. And the seventh defense mechanism is regression. Regression is when stress causes someone to fall back into younger emotional behaviors. You see this when adults suddenly shut down or sulk or stop talking, become unusually dependent on someone, or struggle to regulate their own emotion under pressure. And usually the reaction looks irrational, completely irrational from the outside. But inside, internally, the person no longer feels emotionally equipped to deal with the situation in front of them. So the mind reaches backwards towards older, sometimes much, much older coping mechanisms. The eighth defense mechanism we'll talk about is intellectualization. This one is extremely, extremely common in very self aware people. Intellectualization is when someone analyzes the emotion, just analyzes it instead of actually feeling it. They become very, very good at explaining themselves psychologically, very good at insight, very good at understanding trauma intellectually. But emotionally, they stay completely disconnected from it. They can explain very, very well why they feel the way they do, but without ever actually experiencing the emotion underneath it. And sometimes intelligence itself becomes the defense mechanism then. Thinking replaces feeling. Analysis replaces vulnerability. And eventually people can become trapped inside their own explanations. And the ninth defense mechanism we'll talk about is sublimation. Sublimation is when difficult emotions get redirected onto something constructive. Let's say art or writing or training or music or work or creativity. And this is definitely not always unhealthy, but it's the difference between expression and escapism, or trying to escape something. Someone carrying a lot of anger might channel it into discipline or training. Someone carrying grief might turn it into art or music. The emotion still exists, but instead of destroying the person, it gets transformed into something more meaningful. And honestly, a lot of human creativity comes from this mechanism. The tortured artist. And the 10th defense mechanism is avoidance. And this is probably one of the most common of all. Avoiding conversations, avoiding conflict, avoiding vulnerability, avoiding emotions, avoiding people, avoiding silence, because avoidance creates temporary relief away from the situation you're trying to avoid. But over time, what you avoid usually grows. You keep filling this pot. And eventually, people become trapped in patterns where their whole life slowly starts to revolve around, around managing this discomfort or discomfort in general instead of facing it. And the thing about defense mechanisms is most of them don't feel irrational when it's you doing them or from inside them. They feel normal. They feel obvious. You might notice them at all. They can feel very reasonable, maybe even necessary. That's kind of the whole point of them, though, isn't it? That's why it's so hard to notice them for what they are. And by the time a pattern becomes automatic and no longer feels conscious or like a decision to do it, it just feels like this is just who I am now. And sometimes that is true, but sometimes it's just a strategy your mind learned long, long ago that never got a chance to change. So hopefully some of this information and the ability to be able to put a label on what you're feeling will help you start to recognize these patterns in yourself. And when you start catching them, the denial or the avoidance, the rationalization, the emotional shutdowns, the overanalysis, because the main point of this is you can't change it unless you see it. You can't change a pattern that you don't think is there. Start feeling. If you enjoyed this video, please like it. I remembered to say it. If you enjoyed this video, please like it. And if you'd like to see more content like this, please subscribe. I would really appreciate it. My name is John. You're welcome to be here, and you're more than welcome to stay here.